Snow fell thick enough to swallow sound itself. In the white blanketed forest, the woman stumbled backward as the man lunged forward without warning. Her breath froze in her throat. She didn't know that 300 meters away, a female sniper had held her in the crosshairs for 5 solid minutes, finger resting on the trigger. Through the frost-clouded scope, the sniper watched the deciding moment unfold. A lunge forward, a heartbeat slowing, and a choice that could alter everyone's fate. The cold bit through 3 layers of thermal gear. Sergeant Rebecca Hayes had been motionless for 47 minutes. Her breath came in controlled intervals, shallow enough to avoid fog, deep enough to maintain focus. The spruce branch above her sagged under fresh snow, releasing powder that dusted her ghillie suit in natural camouflage. Perfect. 312 meters downrange, the cabin sat dark against white. No smoke from the chimney. No tracks leading to the door since the last snowfall 2 hours ago. The forest stretched in all directions, dense with lodgepole pines and silence. Rebecca's position was textbook, elevated 20 feet on a natural rock outcrop, shielded by deadfall and living branches. Wind from the northwest at 6 knots, temperature dropping toward 8 degrees Fahrenheit. She'd calculated the ballistic compensation before dawn. Her rifle, a Remington MSR, chambered in. 338 Lapua Magnum rested on its bipod, stock nestled against her shoulder. The weapon had been zeroed at this exact distance 3 days prior. She knew its tendencies like her own pulse, but the mission parameters had shifted. Command's original brief. Observe and report on Clayton Mercer, suspected arms trafficker using the cabin as a waypoint. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Gather intelligence on his contacts and departure route. That was yesterday's mission. This morning's encrypted update changed everything. Female civilian may enter AO. Identity unknown. Protect at all costs. Rules of engagement expanded. Rebecca had read those words 4 times on the handheld display before the message auto-deleted. Each reading raised new questions. What civilian? Why here? And most importantly, protect from what? Command didn't authorize lethal overwatch for hikers who took wrong turns. The forest provided no answers. Only wind through branches. Only the particular silence that comes when snow muffles every sound but your own heartbeat. Rebecca flexed her fingers inside thin gloves, maintaining circulation without movement. Her position allowed clear line of sight to the cabin's entrance, the small clearing to its east, and a section of the trail that approached from the south. She'd been deployed to these mountains before. Montana's wilderness could swallow people whole. Last winter, a survey team vanished for 11 days before rangers found them hypothermic but alive in a ravine. The year before that, a hunter didn't make it out. The cold here wasn't like other places. It had patience. It waited for mistakes. Rebecca's training had taught her the same patience. Navy Special Operations Command, then Delta Force Selection, then 3 years with a joint task force she couldn't name on a resume. 26 confirmed missions across 4 continents. She'd taken shots in sandstorms and monsoons. She'd held position in 110-degree heat and sub-zero nights. But she'd never been ordered to protect a ghost. The mission's secrecy bothered her less than its vagueness. Protection details required knowing the threat profile. Was the civilian a witness? An asset? Someone's daughter who'd wandered from a lodge? Rebecca scanned the tree line with naked eyes, then returned to the scope. Through the Night Force optic, the world compressed into a circle of magnified clarity. She could count individual shingles on the cabin roof, could see where a branch had scraped the siding. Empty. Still empty. Her watch read 11:34 a.m. She'd been on station since 0600, inserted by snowmobile under darkness and left to operate independently. Her extraction wasn't scheduled until sunset, or until the mission concluded, whichever came first. The forest kept its secrets. Rebecca's mind went through the pre-shot checklist even though no shot was imminent. Range, confirmed. Wind, steady. Visibility, adequate despite snow. Rifle status, optimal. Mental state, locked in. Her instructor at sniper school used to say that waiting was 90% of the job. The other 10% happened so fast you'd question if it happened at all. She'd learned the truth of that in Helmand Province. 14 hours in a hide site, barely moving, barely breathing. Then 6 seconds of action that ended a mortar team's operation permanently. This felt different. The mission brief's unusual phrasing echoed, "Protect at all costs." Command didn't use that language lightly. Those words meant civilian priorities superseded everything, including the original target, including mission security, including her own safety. Rebecca had made peace with that calculus years ago. Some things mattered more than coming home. But she preferred knowing what she was protecting. Movement at the forest's southern edge pulled her attention. Through the scope, she tracked it, a fox, red coat stark against snow, picking its way toward the cabin's clearing. It paused, nose testing the air, then continued. False alarm. Rebecca settled back into stillness. Her body had learned to ignore discomfort. The cold was information, not suffering. The cramping in her left calf was data to be noted and dismissed. She thought about the cabin again. Its isolation was strategic. 15 miles from the nearest maintained road, accessible only by snowmobile or cross-country skis. The kind of place you picked when you wanted privacy, or when you were hiding. Clayton Mercer had visited twice in the past month, according to surveillance. He'd arrive after dark, stay less than 6 hours, and leave before dawn. Each time, he came alone. Each time, he carried a heavy pack in and a lighter one out. The pattern suggested a cache site, weapons, money, or documents being stored between transactions. But if that was all it was, command wouldn't have escalated. The snow intensified, fat flakes falling straight down. Visibility decreased to maybe 200 meters in the open, less in the trees. Rebecca adjusted her focus, keeping the cabin centered. Her radio remained silent. Single-click transmissions only, and only if critical. Otherwise, she was a ghost in the forest, unknown and unseen, the way she preferred it. Minutes stretched, the cold deepened, the forest waited, and somewhere in that vast white expanse, a woman walked toward a moment she couldn't imagine, protected by someone she'd never meet. Claire Donovan's hands had gone numb 2 miles back. She'd left the lodge before sunrise, ignoring the weather report and the concierge's polite warning about the forecast. The trail map showed the frozen lake at 5 miles, an easy morning hike, she'd thought. Her husband had done this route last year and come back with photos that made the cold look beautiful. Now, the cold just felt cold. The trail markers were harder to follow under fresh snow. Claire had passed the last orange diamond 10 minutes ago, or maybe 20. Her phone showed no signal, just the GPS dot crawling across the map screen. The battery icon blinked at 15%. She should have turned back. The thought came clearly, but her legs kept moving forward. She'd driven 11 hours from Denver to reach this lodge. She'd taken time off work, something she never did. She'd promised herself she'd complete at least one solo hike before returning to the office and the divorce papers waiting on her kitchen counter. One thing she controlled. One choice that was entirely hers. The forest pressed close on both sides. Claire's breath came harder now, more from anxiety than exertion. The trail seemed to narrow, or maybe she'd drifted off it entirely. The GPS showed her position, but the map's detail ended a quarter mile ahead, replaced by generic green indicating wilderness area. She stopped to check the compass feature, turning slowly. North should lead back to the lodge road, but between here and there was miles of terrain she hadn't studied. A branch cracked somewhere behind her. Claire froze. She listened past her own pulse, past the whisper of falling snow. Nothing. Probably a tree limb releasing its snow load. The forest did that. She'd heard it a dozen times already. She started walking again, faster now. The map showed something ahead. A structure icon, maybe a ranger station or emergency shelter. If she could reach it, she'd have a landmark to navigate from. The cold settled deeper. Her toes ached inside insulated boots. She'd worn a good jacket, thermal layers, weatherproof pants, everything the outdoor store clerk had recommended. But gear couldn't fix bad decisions. Another sound, this time to her left. Closer. Claire's heart kicked. She scanned the tree line, seeing nothing but white trunks and snow-heavy branches. Wind, she told herself. Just wind. But the air was still. She walked faster, almost jogging now, following what she hoped was the trail. Her backpack bounced against her shoulders. Inside it, water bottles, granola bars, a first aid kit, a whistle, and the satellite messenger her brother had insisted she rent. The messenger was supposed to connect to emergency services if she pressed the SOS button. She'd laughed when he demonstrated it. Who gets lost on a marked trail? Now her hand moved to the backpack strap, confirming the messenger's position in the outer pocket, just in case. The forest opened slightly ahead. Through the snow, Claire spotted a clearing and what looked like a building. Relief hit like warm water. The shelter. She'd made it. She pushed through a final cluster of pines and stopped. Not a shelter. A cabin. Dark wood, maybe 20 feet square, with a steep roof designed to shed snow. No lights in the windows. No smoke from the metal chimney. But it meant people came here, which meant a maintained trail must be close. Claire approached cautiously. Her boots crunched through the snow's crust. The cabin door faced east, away from the worst of the weather. A small covered porch offered protection from the elements. She climbed the 3 steps to the porch, testing each one. Solid. Someone maintained this place, even if it sat empty now. The door had a padlock, old and weathered. Claire cupped her hands against the window glass, peering inside. Basic interior. Wooden table, 2 chairs, a cot against the far wall. A cabinet that probably held emergency supplies. She stepped back, considering. The satellite messenger could get her help, but help would take hours to arrive. The cabin was locked. The trail, if she could find it again, led back to the lodge eventually. But her phone was dying, and the cold was winning. Claire pulled out the messenger device. Its screen glowed green. Before she could decide, another sound stopped her. Footsteps. Not the crack of branches. Not wind. The distinct rhythm of boots in snow, approaching from the tree line to the south. Claire turned, her breath catching. A figure emerged from the pines. Male, tall, wearing dark winter gear and carrying a pack. He stopped when he saw her, distance still between them. They stared at each other across the clearing. "Didn't expect company," he called out. His voice carried easily in the muffled air. Claire's training from self-defense classes kicked in. Assess. Don't assume. "I got turned around," she said, following the trail back to Carson Lodge. The man didn't move closer. Wrong direction. Lodge is northwest from here. "Thanks." Claire held her ground on the porch. "I'll correct my heading." "Weather's getting worse." He glanced at the darkening sky. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "I'll manage." Something in her tone made him raise his hand slightly, a placating gesture. "Not trying to scare you. Just saying it's a long walk back in this." Claire's thumb found the SOS button on the messenger, holding it without pressing. 3 seconds to activate. "I appreciate the warning." The man looked at the cabin, then back at her. His expression was hard to read at this distance, through falling snow. "That place has emergency supplies inside if you need them." "It's locked. Keys under the propane tank." Around back, Claire hesitated. "How did he know that? You come here often?" "Sometimes." He adjusted his pack. "Look, I'm just passing through. But you look cold, and it's another hour before the weather breaks. Lock the door behind you if you want. I'll keep moving." He started to circle the clearing, giving the cabin wide berth. Claire watched him, every instinct alert. He could be exactly what he appeared, another hiker who knew the area. Or he could be the reason this place was empty and locked. As he passed the cabin's western side, maybe 30 feet away, he paused, looked back at her. "Check your map again," he said. "The trail markers behind those pines," he pointed. "Quarter-mile that direction, you'll hit the main trail." "Thanks." He nodded once and continued into the forest. Claire waited until he disappeared completely before exhaling. Her hand shook as she lowered the messenger. Maybe he was helpful. Maybe he just saved her hours of wandering. Or maybe he was circling back. She descended from the porch and moved toward the tree line he'd indicated, but kept the cabin in her peripheral vision. The forest felt different now, less empty, more watched. She didn't know that 300 meters upslope, Rebecca Hayes had centered her crosshairs on the man's chest the moment he'd emerged from the trees. Didn't know that finger pressure had increased on a trigger worth 5 pounds of pull. Didn't know that the decision between life and death had hung on every word spoken, every movement made. Claire only knew that something felt wrong, and she needed to leave. Now, through the scope, Rebecca tracked the man's movement. Not Clayton Mercer. Different build, different gait. This one moved with purpose, but not training. His path through the forest showed tactical awareness without tactical discipline. Someone who knew the woods, but hadn't been taught how to disappear in them. Rebecca's finger had found the trigger the moment he'd appeared. Now it rested there, applying 1 pound of the 5-pound pull. Not enough to fire, enough to be ready. The woman on the cabin porch, Claire, he'd called her, showed good instincts, kept distance, kept alert, didn't accept easy reassurance. Smart. But the man's behavior pattern triggered alerts. He'd approached from the south, exactly where Mercer had been spotted entering the forest yesterday. He knew about the cabin's key location, and most concerning, he'd looked directly at Rebecca's position before speaking. Not at her, she was too well hidden, but at the hillside. A scan that suggested awareness of sight lines and overwatch positions. Professional awareness. Rebecca's mind raced through scenarios. If he was Mercer's associate, the woman's arrival complicated everything. If he was unrelated, his presence still created risk. Command's orders prioritized the civilian above all else. The man continued his circuit around the clearing. Rebecca adjusted her point of aim, tracking his center mass. At this range, with this rifle and this ammunition, there was no wounding shot. If she fired, he stopped breathing. The decision matrix was simple. Does he present imminent threat? Not yet. But the interval between not yet and too late could be measured in heartbeats. He paused at the western edge of the clearing. Through the scope, Rebecca watched him turn back toward Claire. The woman stood frozen on the porch, one hand in her pocket, likely holding the emergency device Rebecca had noticed earlier. The man spoke again. Rebecca couldn't hear the words at this distance, but she read his body language. No aggressive posture, hands visible, pack still shouldered. Then he pointed toward the northern tree line, giving directions. Rebecca's tactical computer ran calculations. If he meant harm, this was the moment he'd close distance. The woman was isolated, exposed, unprepared. He had the advantage of surprise and physicality. He didn't move. Instead, he continued walking, deliberately widening the gap between himself and Claire. His path took him west into denser forest, away from both the cabin and the woman. Rebecca kept him centered in the scope. Her breathing remained controlled. Heart rate, elevated but manageable. Trigger finger, steady at 1 pound of pressure. He reached the tree line. He entered the forest. He kept walking. Rebecca held her aim for 30 seconds after he disappeared, scanning the forest for movement. Nothing. The tracks he'd left were already filling with fresh snow. She shifted back to Claire, who remained on the porch, staring after the man. The woman's hand was still in her pocket, still ready to call for help. Good instincts, Rebecca thought again. Claire descended the porch steps carefully, moving toward the northern tree line where the man had pointed. She walked slowly, checking over her shoulder every few steps. Rebecca tracked her progress. The woman was heading the right direction. Northwest would eventually intersect the trail system leading to Carson Lodge. In this weather, she had maybe 2 hours before darkness made travel dangerous. But something felt incomplete. The man's behavior, his knowledge of the cabin, his timing. Rebecca keyed her radio once a status update clicked. Command would register that she remained operational and alert. No response came. Radio discipline was absolute on missions like this. She returned her attention to the clearing. Empty now. Snow continued to fall, already obscuring the boot prints. In another hour, there'd be no evidence anyone had been here. Rebecca's training included pattern recognition. She'd learned to read terrain and behavior, to spot anomalies before they became threats. This situation registered as anomalous, but the threat level remained ambiguous. The man could be exactly what he appeared, a local hiker who happened upon the scene and offered assistance before moving on. Montana's backcountry had plenty of solitary types who preferred trees to people. Or he could be part of something larger. The timing was too convenient. Claire's arrival at this specific location, where Mercer conducted business, the man's appearance minutes later, his knowledge of the cabin's details. Coincidence or coordination? Rebecca had learned to distrust coincidence. She scanned the forest systematically, dividing her view into sectors. North quadrant, clear. East, clear. South, no movement beyond wind-stirred branches. West, the direction the man had gone, now a wall of snow and pine. Her body temp had dropped another degree. She'd been motionless long enough that the cold worked past her gear's capabilities. Not dangerous yet, but trending that direction. She flexed her toes inside her boots, maintaining circulation. The mission could end here. Claire was heading toward safety. The mysterious man had departed. Mercer hadn't appeared. Rebecca could extract, report the incident, and let command decide the next step. But the orders had been explicit: protect at all costs. At all costs included staying on station until the civilian was confirmed safe. Rebecca settled in for a longer wait. Through the scope, she watched Claire reach the northern tree line and pause, checking her phone's GPS. The woman looked back at the cabin once, then continued into the forest. Moment by moment, the distance increased. 300 meters became 350, then 400. At 450 meters, Claire would exit Rebecca's effective range. The 338 Lapua could reach farther, but accuracy degraded with distance and weather conditions. Rebecca needed to maintain lethal precision. Decision point approaching. She could abandon her position and follow at a distance, maintaining overwatch while Claire hiked out. Or she could trust that the immediate threat had passed and hold station in case Mercer arrived. Command's orders prioritized the civilian. That made the choice clear. Rebecca began breaking down her position, a process that required methodical care. She disconnected the rifle from its bipod, secured the optic, and stowed everything in the drag bag designed to look like deadfall. Her movement was minimal and deliberate, leaving no trace took longer than arriving. She was halfway through the process when movement south of the cabin caught her attention. Rebecca froze, rifle across her knees, scope still attached. The man had returned, different angle this time, coming from the southwest. He'd circled back through the forest, approaching the cabin from a new direction. Rebecca's hands moved automatically, bringing the rifle up, re-establishing her shooting position. Through the scope, she found him immediately. He stood at the clearing's edge, watching the direction Claire had gone. His posture had changed. No more casual hiker. This was focused, predatory. He checked his surroundings carefully, then moved toward the cabin. Rebecca's finger returned to the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure now, halfway to firing. The man reached the porch, tried the door locked, as expected, then moved to the cabin's rear. He knew where he was going. Within 30 seconds, he'd located the key under the propane tank and entered the building. Through the cabin's window, Rebecca saw him move inside. He didn't turn on lights, didn't search for supplies. He went directly to the floor in the far corner and pulled back what appeared to be a loose board. Mercer's cache. Rebecca's radio clicked twice. Command signaled that they were monitoring her situation through her body camera's transmission. They were seeing what she saw. The man pulled something from beneath the floorboards, a package wrapped in plastic. He opened his pack and transferred the contents. Rebecca's mission crystallized. This wasn't random. The man was here for Mercer's cache, and he'd encountered Claire by chance or worse. He'd known she'd be here and used her as cover for his own arrival. Either way, Claire was compromised. The man finished his work quickly, replaced the floorboard, and exited the cabin. He didn't bother locking the door behind him. Instead, he looked north, toward the direction Claire had walked. Then he started following her tracks. Rebecca's trigger finger reached 3 pounds of pressure. One decision away from irreversible action. Through the scope, she watched him walk with purpose. Not running, but not meandering, a pursuit pace. The distance between them and Claire was closing. Rebecca's radio clicked 3 times. Command's authorization, engage if necessary. The man entered the northern tree line, following Claire's trail. Snow was filling the tracks, but they remained visible enough to follow. He moved faster now, no longer concerned with being observed. Rebecca made her calculation. Claire had maybe 400 meters head start. The man was moving at a pace that would close that gap in 15 minutes. Rebecca abandoned stealth. She slung the rifle, grabbed her pack, and moved down from her position. Speed mattered now more than concealment. The forest floor was treacherous, hidden obstacles under snow, unstable footing, branches grabbing at her gear. She moved in a controlled rush, using trees for support, keeping her bearing north. 200 meters. 300. Her lungs burned in the cold air. She reached the northern tree line and found the tracks. 3 sets now. Claire's smaller prints heading steadily northwest. The man's larger prints following the same path. And now, Rebecca's, coming from a different angle. The convergence was inevitable. Rebecca increased her pace, rifle now carried at ready position. Through breaks in the trees ahead, she caught glimpses of movement. The man had spotted Claire, and Claire had no idea he was there. Rebecca's first blizzard mission had been in the Hindu Kush. Different mountains, same problem. Visibility measured in meters, cold that turned thought sluggish, and a target who wouldn't wait for perfect conditions. Lieutenant Hayes then, 26 years old and proving herself to a team that didn't want a woman in their sniper section, the Taliban commander they'd been tracking had moved through a village during the worst snowstorm of the season, confident that American technology couldn't find him in whiteout conditions. He'd been right about the drones and satellites, wrong about the sniper buried in a hide site on the village's eastern ridge. Rebecca had held position for 19 hours that mission. No movement, no food, minimal water, just breath control and patience, while snow accumulated on her ghillie suit. The shot came during a brief break in the weather, 3 seconds of clarity, one trigger pull, and a convoy of RPGs never made it to the American firebase. Her spotter that day, Sergeant Mike Carson, had looked at her afterward with new respect. "You didn't even hesitate." "Hesitation creates doubt," she'd replied. "Doubt creates failure." That mission earned her acceptance, also taught her something about the space between patience and action, how you could wait hours, days, weeks for a single moment. And when it came, your body had to move faster than your mind could question. Now, pushing through Montana forest at near sprint pace, Rebecca felt that same compression of time. The waiting had ended, action was immediate. But this mission had a complication the Afghan operation hadn't. A civilian in the crossfire. Claire wasn't a combatant, wasn't an asset who'd accepted the risks. She was a woman on a hike who'd stumbled into something she couldn't understand. Command's orders to protect her weren't just tactical, they were moral. Rebecca had taken lives to save lives. That calculus was clean. This situation carried more variables. She pushed faster, ignoring the burn in her legs. The altitude was different from her usual operating range, thinner air, less oxygen. Her conditioning kept her moving, but the effort cost more than it would have at sea level. Through the trees ahead, she glimpsed the man again. He'd closed the distance to Claire significantly. Maybe 150 meters separated them now. Rebecca's tactical mind analyzed as she ran. The man wasn't trying for stealth anymore. He wanted to catch up before Claire reached civilization. That suggested a timeline. Either reinforcements were coming, or he had a window that was closing. Or he needed to ensure she couldn't identify him later. The last possibility was worst case. If he'd decided Claire was a witness who needed silencing, intervention had to happen before he reached her. Rebecca's boots found rhythm despite the terrain. She'd trained in snow, sand, mud, and urban rubble. The body learned to adapt, to find traction where none seemed available. A fallen log appeared. She hurdled it without breaking stride. The distance closed. 120 meters, 110. She could hear him now, the crunch of his boots, the sound of labored breathing. He was fit, but not conditioned for altitude sprints. Good news for Rebecca. Ahead, Claire's figure appeared through the trees. She'd stopped, checking her phone again, probably confirming her heading or trying to estimate the distance remaining. The man saw her stop. He slowed his pace, suddenly cautious. Rebecca realized his plan. Get close enough that running wouldn't help, then control the situation. Classic predator behavior. Close the distance when the prey is distracted. Strike when they realize the danger too late. She had maybe 30 seconds to change the equation. Rebecca angled her approach, moving right to create a better sight line. The rifle remained slung, can't shoot while sprinting through forest. But she could establish position, could force him to respond to her presence instead of Claire's vulnerability. 20 seconds. The man reached for something in his jacket. Rebecca's training cataloged possibilities. Weapon, phone, restraints. Whatever it was, he was preparing for contact. Claire put her phone away and started walking again, oblivious. 15 seconds. Rebecca burst from the tree line into a small clearing 30 feet wide, snow-covered ground, Claire on the far side. The woman turned at the sound, eyes going wide. The man, caught in the middle, spun to face Rebecca. His hand came out of his jacket holding a pistol. Time compressed. Rebecca's body moved through the sequence drilled into muscle memory. Sling release, rifle to shoulder, stock to cheek, eye to scope, target acquisition, breath expelled halfway, finger to trigger. The entire motion took 1.3 seconds. The man's pistol was still rising. Rebecca's crosshairs found his center mass. "Don't," she said. Single word, absolute authority. He froze. The pistol was halfway to pointing at her, but halfway wasn't enough. Not against a rifle at 30 meters. Claire screamed, a short, sharp sound that cut off as quickly as it started. She'd processed the scene, two people with guns, herself trapped between them. "Drop it," Rebecca commanded. "Now." The man's eyes flicked between Rebecca's rifle and Claire's position, calculating odds, looking for advantages. He wouldn't find any. Rebecca had the superior weapon, superior position, superior training. If he moved wrong, he stopped breathing. "Last chance," Rebecca said. Her finger rested at 3 pounds of pressure. 2 more pounds and the 338 Lapua round would cross the distance in a fraction of a second. At this range, body armor wouldn't matter. The round would punch through and remove vital organs from his body cavity. He knew it too. Whatever training he'd had included ballistics, reality. The pistol dropped into the snow. "Kick it away." He complied, sending the weapon spinning across the clearing. "Hands behind your head. Knees." He dropped to his knees slowly, hands interlaced behind his head. Textbook surrender position. Rebecca didn't lower her rifle. She'd seen surrenders turn into attacks too many times. The moment you relaxed was the moment they moved. "Claire," she called, not taking her eyes off the man. "You need to leave. Now." What? Claire's voice shook. "Not important. Go northwest. Stay on the trail. Don't stop until you reach the lodge." "Is he?" Something in Rebecca's tone penetrated Claire's shock. She started backing away, then turned and ran. Rebecca waited until the sounds of Claire's retreat faded before speaking again. "Who sent you?" The man said nothing. "You're after Mercer's cash. Who's paying?" Still nothing. Rebecca's radio clicked 4 times, command signal that extraction for the civilian was arranged. Claire would be intercepted by rangers before reaching the lodge, debriefed, protected, which meant Rebecca's mission priority just shifted. The man seemed to sense the change. His shoulders tensed. "You're not law enforcement," he said, first words since drawing his weapon. "No identification, no backup call, no radio for local police." "Correct." "So you're like me, off-books contractor." Rebecca didn't respond. Let him talk, let him rationalize. "We're on the same side," he continued, "just different employers. No reason this has to go badly." "You drew on me." "Misunderstanding. Thought you were a threat. You followed a civilian woman into the forest with a weapon." His jaw tightened. "She was in the wrong place. And you were going to correct that situation how, exactly?" Silence. Rebecca's finger remained on the trigger. 3 pounds of pressure, steady as stone. She'd made harder choices in worse circumstances. But those had been combat zones, clear enemy, clear mission. This was domestic soil, complicated politics, and a target whose employer might have connections that reached into her own command structure. The professional calculation: eliminate him, eliminate the threat to the operation and to Claire's safety. The moral calculation: he'd surrendered, no longer posed immediate danger. The practical calculation: a body in Montana forest during a snowstorm raised questions that could compromise the entire Mercer investigation. Rebecca made her choice. "Stand up." Slowly, he rose to his feet, hands still behind his head. "Walk backward." 10 steps. He complied. "Turn around. Start walking east. Don't stop. Don't look back. If I see you again, I won't talk first." He stood still for a moment, processing, then nodded once and started walking. Rebecca kept him in her sights until the forest swallowed him completely. Then she maintained position for 3 more minutes, ensuring he wasn't circling back. Her radio clicked once, command acknowledging her decision. Rebecca safed her rifle and started northwest, following Claire's path at a steady pace. The woman was safe now, probably being picked up by rangers. The mission was complete. The snow continued to fall, erasing tracks, erasing evidence, erasing everything except the choice she'd made. In the Hindu Kush, the decision had been easy. Taliban commander with American blood on his hands. Today was harder. Today she'd let someone walk away who might kill someone else tomorrow. But today, the woman she was ordered to protect would make it home. Rebecca moved through the forest like a ghost, leaving no trace, carrying the weight of decisions that would never appear in any official report. The satellite phone's vibration in Rebecca's chest pocket was barely perceptible. She stopped mid-stride, hand moving to the device. Incoming message from command, urgent classification based on the vibration pattern. She pulled it from the insulated pocket, shielding the screen from falling snow. 2 lines of text. Second target en route, your position. Mercer +1 unknown. Ada 12 minutes. Rebecca's tactical brain recalculated instantly. The man she'd just released wasn't the primary concern. Mercer was coming, and he was bringing someone. The timestamp on the message was 3 minutes old, signal delay through encrypted relay. That put Mercer's actual ETA at 9 minutes, maybe less if they were pushing hard. She looked back the direction she'd come. The cabin was 15 minutes behind her at combat pace. The clearing where she'd confronted the first man was 7 minutes. She was out of position, caught between the civilian's escape route and the developing situation behind her. Command hadn't ordered her back. That was deliberate. They were letting her make the tactical decision, continue forward ensuring Claire's safety, or return to handle the Mercer situation. Rebecca processed the variables. Claire was 40 minutes from the lodge, moving toward help. Rangers were deploying to intercept. The immediate threat to her was gone. The first man was heading east, away from everyone. Mercer represented the primary mission objective. Whatever he was moving through this area, whatever the cache contained, Command considered it significant enough to deploy a sniper in the middle of winter. And now, Mercer was coming back, earlier than his usual pattern, with an unknown associate. That detail, unknown, registered as critical. If Command couldn't identify Mercer's companion, it meant someone new had entered his operation. New players brought unknown capabilities and unknown risks. Rebecca made her decision. She turned south, back toward the cabin. The return journey demanded everything her conditioning could provide. Uphill through accumulated snow, lungs pulling thin mountain air, legs burning from the earlier sprint. She pushed past the discomfort, past the fatigue, into the mechanical space where the body was just a tool executing commands. She reached the clearing in 6 minutes, better than her estimate. Her position on the rock outcrop would take another 4 minutes to regain. Time was compressed. Rebecca chose a different approach. Instead of returning to the elevated position, she moved to the western tree line, finding cover behind a cluster of pines that offered concealment and a clear field of fire toward the cabin. Less ideal than the original position. Shorter range, maybe 180 meters, lower angle, but she'd be in place when Mercer arrived, and position beats perfection when time is limited. She settled behind the trees, arranged her rifle across a fallen log, and controlled her breathing. The sprint had elevated her heart rate to 140 beats per minute. She needed it below 80 for accurate shooting. The training took over. Deep breath in, slow breath out. Let the body calm itself. 90 seconds of focused breathing brought her down to 72 BPM. She checked her sight picture through the scope. The cabin entrance was clear. The small porch, the clearing. Visibility was decreasing with the continuing snowfall, but adequate at this range. Movement from the south exactly on time. Through the scope, Rebecca identified 2 figures approaching. The lead man matched Mercer's description from her briefing package. 6 feet tall, heavy build, gray beard, distinctive limp in his left leg from an old injury. He carried a large backpack and moved with the caution of someone who knew he was doing something illegal. The second figure walked 3 steps behind. Smaller, lighter build, wearing a dark parka with the hood up. Rebecca couldn't see the face clearly through the snow. They reached the cabin, and Mercer produced a key, not the hidden one under the propane tank, but his own copy. They entered together. Rebecca adjusted her scope for the decreased distance and settled in to watch. Through the window, she observed Mercer go directly to the cache location in the floor. He pulled back the board the first man had replaced and stopped. His body language changed instantly. Shoulders tensed, head snapped toward his companion. Even at this distance, Rebecca could read the anger in his posture. Something was missing from the cache. The second figure moved closer, visible now through the window. Hood back, revealing features, female, maybe 30 years old, blonde hair. She held her hands up defensively as Mercer gestured angrily. Rebecca's training included reading lips. Not perfectly, but enough to catch key words. Through the scope, she focused on Mercer's mouth. Supposed to be here. Someone was here. Your job to secure. The woman responded, words Rebecca couldn't catch clearly, but the defensive posture was clear. Mercer pulled something from his jacket. For a moment, Rebecca's finger found the trigger if it was a weapon. The woman was in danger, but it was a phone. He made a call, pacing in the small cabin, gesticulating. The woman moved toward the window. She looked out at the clearing, scanning the tree line. Rebecca remained absolutely still. Her position was good, camouflage was effective, and movement was what gave away concealed shooters. She'd been trained by the best. If you don't move, you don't exist. The woman's gaze swept across Rebecca's position without pausing. Satisfied, she turned back to Mercer. He ended the call and grabbed his pack. They had a heated exchange. Rebecca caught fragments through the scope. Told you. Tracked. Need to leave now. Mercer made a decision. He pulled something from his pack, an incendiary device, Rebecca realized. He was going to burn the cabin and destroy any evidence of who'd been there. Rebecca's radio clicked 6 times. Command's urgent signal. Do not allow destruction of the site. She'd been authorized to prevent the cabin's burning, which meant she was authorized to stop Mercer. Her crosshairs found Mercer's center mass. He was inside the cabin, separated from her by window glass. Not an ideal shot glass could deflect the round unpredictably, but manageable at this distance with this rifle. The woman grabbed Mercer's arm, stopping him from activating the device. They argued again. She pointed at the door, clearly advocating for leaving immediately rather than taking time to destroy evidence. Mercer hesitated, professional paranoia warring with the practical need to escape. The woman won the argument. Mercer pocketed the incendiary device and headed for the door. They exited together, moving quickly toward the southern tree line. Mercer kept looking back at the cabin, clearly unhappy about leaving it intact. Rebecca tracked them through the scope until they disappeared into the forest. She maintained her position for 5 more minutes, ensuring they weren't circling back. Her radio clicked twice. Command acknowledged that she'd protected the site without compromising the investigation. Rebecca allowed herself a moment to process what she'd observed. 3 different parties had converged on this location today. Claire, civilian, accidental. The first man contractor, theft, and Mercer plus associate original target, interrupted. The first man had taken something from the cache. Mercer discovered the theft. But Mercer hadn't found who'd done it, which meant the investigation would continue, pressure would increase, and more people would be drawn into whatever Mercer was running. Claire's accidental involvement had created the cascade. Her random hike had provided cover for the first man's theft, which had altered Mercer's timeline, which had prevented the cabin's destruction. Chaos theory in action. Small changes creating large effects. Rebecca's phone vibrated again. New message. Civilian secure. Rangers intercepted. Debriefing minimal. Extract when ready. Mission complete. Then. Claire was safe. The cabin was intact. Mercer was still at large, but now off balance, making mistakes that would lead to his capture eventually. Rebecca began breaking down her position for the 2nd time that day. The process was familiar now. Pack the rifle, secure the gear, erase evidence of her presence. Before leaving, she looked back at the cabin one more time. In 24 hours, a forensics team would process this site. They'd find the cache, analyze what remained, and piece together the trafficking network Mercer had built. They'd never know a woman had died here today if Rebecca had made different choices, if she'd shot the first man instead of warning him off, if she'd engaged Mercer despite the tactical complications. But Command didn't pay her to take unnecessary shots. They paid her to make hard decisions in impossible circumstances and live with the consequences. Rebecca turned northwest and started the long walk to the extraction point. The snow was falling harder now, covering her tracks within minutes. By sunset, there'd be no evidence she'd ever been here. She preferred it that way. Claire's legs were shaking when the ranger intercepted her. She'd been jogging, nearly running for 20 minutes, when he appeared on the trail ahead, wearing official uniform and carrying a radio. The sight of authority nearly dropped her to her knees. "Claire Donovan?" he called out. She nodded, unable to speak past the cold and fear. "I'm Ranger Pete Morrison. I need you to come with me. There's a vehicle waiting at the trailhead." There was a man, Claire managed, and a woman with a rifle. "I know. We'll debrief at the station. First priority is getting you somewhere warm." Morrison led her through the forest at a steady pace, using a different route than she'd taken. He talked steadily as they walked casual topics, weather, trail conditions, clearly trying to keep her calm and focused. Claire let his voice wash over her while her mind replayed the scene in the clearing. The woman had appeared from nowhere, rifle raised, absolute command in her voice. The man had been following Claire with a gun. She'd been seconds away from something terrible. "How did you know I was out here?" Claire asked when she found her voice again. Morrison glanced back. "Emergency services got a ping from your satellite messenger. Automatic check-in signal. I didn't activate it. The devices have a passive tracking feature if you're in a designated wilderness area longer than expected. Your rental agreement included that clause." Claire didn't remember signing anything about that, but right now she didn't care. The tracking had brought help. They reached the trailhead 30 minutes later. A Ranger Service SUV sat running, heat blasting from the vents. Another ranger waited by the vehicle, female, mid-40s, with the calm competence that came from years in the backcountry. "Miss Donovan, I'm Ranger Chief Sarah Chen. Please get in the vehicle. We'll take you to Carson Lodge first, then we need to ask you some questions." Claire climbed into the back seat, feeling the heat thaw her frozen hands. Morrison took the driver's seat while Chen sat up front, twisted to face Claire. "Can you tell me what happened out there?" Claire recounted everything. Getting lost, finding the cabin, meeting the first man, his departure, then his return while she was walking. She described the woman with the rifle, the confrontation, being told to run. Chen and Morrison exchanged looks. "Did the woman identify herself?" Chen asked. "No. She just told me to leave and keep walking to the lodge." "Can you describe her?" "Maybe 5 to 8, athletic build. She was wearing winter camo gear, ghillie suit, I think it's called. Had a serious rifle, military style. Brown hair, I think. Hard to tell with all the gear." Morrison was taking notes. "And the man who followed you?" "White, maybe 6 to 2, dark jacket and pants. He had a pistol. That's all I saw before the woman made him drop it." "Did you hear them talk to each other?" Claire thought back. She gave him orders. He followed them. That's it. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "Miss Donovan, what you stumbled into was likely a law enforcement operation. We'll coordinate with federal agencies to confirm. But my assessment is that you accidentally entered an active investigation area." The woman wasn't a ranger. "No. But there are other agencies that conduct operations in wilderness areas. DEA, FBI, ATF, sometimes military for training exercises." "She was going to shoot him," Claire said quietly. "I saw it in her eyes. If he hadn't dropped the gun, she would have killed him. But she didn't. She controlled the situation and ensured your safety. That's what matters." They drove in silence for several minutes. Carson Lodge appeared through the snow, its warm lights looking like salvation. "We'll need you to remain at the lodge tonight," Chen said as Morrison pulled up to the entrance. "Just a precaution. Someone will come by this evening to take an official statement." "Am I in trouble?" "No. But you were a witness to something that may become part of a larger investigation. Your cooperation helps keep everyone safe." Claire nodded, too tired to argue. Morrison helped her to her room, waited while she confirmed the door locked, then left with a promise that someone would check on her in an hour. Inside the room, Claire stripped off her wet clothes and stood under the shower's hot water for 20 minutes. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her body was warming, but her mind kept returning to that moment in the clearing. The woman's absolute certainty, the rifle's steady aim, the man's realization that he was beaten, and somewhere in that exchange, Claire had seen something else. The woman wasn't just protecting Claire, she was disappointed she couldn't do more. Like there was a bigger picture Claire hadn't seen, a mission beyond saving one lost hiker. Claire got out of the shower and found her phone. Still no signal, but she had the lodge's Wi-Fi now. She opened her messages and typed one to her brother. Made it back safe. Long story. Call you tomorrow. She started to add details, then stopped. The Rangers had asked her not to discuss it publicly. Operational security, they'd said. She deleted the draft and wrote instead, made it back. Weather was worse than expected. Talk soon. She hit send and sat on the bed, staring at the window. Outside, snow continued to fall. The forest stretched beyond the lodge's property, dark and deep and full of secrets. Someone was out there right now. The woman with the rifle, moving through that forest like a ghost, protecting people who never knew she existed. Claire had spent the last 3 months feeling sorry for herself. Divorce pending, career stalled, life feeling directionless and small. The woman in the forest wasn't worried about divorce papers or office politics. She was making life and death decisions in real time, accepting responsibility that most people couldn't imagine. Claire lay back on the bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. She kept seeing the woman's eyes, cold and calculating, but not cruel, professional. Whoever she was, wherever she was now, Claire hoped she made it out safely too. The extraction point was 6 miles northeast of the cabin. Rebecca made the distance in 90 minutes, moving at tactical pace through increasingly heavy snowfall. Her gear was packed, her tracks disappearing behind her, and her mind was already filing the mission under completed successful. The satellite phone vibrated at 1547 hours. Rebecca checked the screen, expecting extraction confirmation. Instead, alert, civilian compromised, second man en route lodge, intercept authorized. Rebecca stopped moving. Read it again. Claire was at the lodge now, safe with Rangers. How was she compromised? A second message arrived. First contractor identified via facial rec. Name, Eric Davies. Prior military. Dishonorable discharge. Known associate of Mercer. His vehicle spotted heading toward Carson Lodge. Rebecca's tactical brain processed the implications instantly. Davies hadn't walked away because she'd scared him off. He'd walked away to regroup. And now he was going after the only person who could identify him to law enforcement. Claire had seen his face, could describe him, would testify if questioned officially. Davies was coming to ensure that wouldn't happen. Rebecca checked her position. She was 6 miles from the extraction point, 8 miles from the lodge by direct route. The lodge was accessible by road. Davies would arrive in 30 minutes or less. She was 90 minutes away at her current pace, 60 minutes if she abandoned tactical caution and ran full out through the forest. Not fast enough. Her phone showed one more message. Rangers notified. Response delayed due to weather. Local law enforcement minimum 45 minutes out. You are primary. Rebecca made a decision she'd regret later regardless of outcome. She changed direction, angling northeast toward the Forest Service road that ran parallel to her position. If she could intercept a vehicle, she could reach the lodge in time. The problem: no authorized vehicles should be on that road in this weather, which meant any vehicle she flagged down would be civilian, and commandeering civilian transportation raised legal problems her mission authority might not cover. But might not cover was better than letting a man murder a witness. Rebecca increased her pace to a run. The rifle bounced against her back, the pack's weight negligible compared to the urgency driving her forward. The forest blurred past trees and snow and failing light. She reached the road in 18 minutes. Deserted, as expected. The snow on the pavement was undisturbed. Rebecca moved to a curve where approaching vehicles would slow naturally, maximizing her chance of being seen before they passed. She positioned herself in the road's center, rifle slung but visible. Then she waited. 3 minutes. 5, 7. The distant sound of an engine reached her ears, getting louder. A Jeep Wrangler appeared around the curve, slowed when the driver saw her. The vehicle stopped 20 feet away. The driver's window rolled down. Male, 60s, weathered face. You need help? I'm federal law enforcement, Rebecca said, approaching the driver's side. No identification to show, no badge, nothing but authority in her voice. I need your vehicle. Emergency. The man's eyes went to her rifle, to her tactical gear, to her face. You're serious. Someone's life is in immediate danger. Keys. Now. Something in her tone made him comply. He pulled the keys from the ignition and handed them over. Carson Lodge? How did you know? Only thing out this way. And you look like you're in a hurry to get there. He climbed out. Radio's on channel 12 if you need to call for backup. Rebecca was already in the driver's seat. Walk back to the trailhead. Rangers will meet you there. Don't mention this to anyone. She didn't wait for his response. The Jeep's tires spun briefly on snow before finding traction. Rebecca accelerated hard, pushing the vehicle faster than conditions safely allowed. The road was treacherous ice beneath fresh snow, curves appearing suddenly, visibility maybe 200 feet. Rebecca drove with controlled aggression, knowing the Jeep's limits and staying just inside them. The radio crackled. Unit 4 to base. Davies' vehicle confirmed heading north on Forest Route 27, ETA, to Lodge 12 minutes. Rebecca grabbed the handset. This is Federal Operator Sierra 2. I'm en route to Carson Lodge, ETA, 8 minutes. Do not approach Davies without backup. Static, then, Sierra 2, this is Ranger Chief Chen. Confirm you're authorized for intervention? Confirmed. Keep Claire Donovan secured in her room. Davies is coming for her. Copy. We're evacuating other guests now. Rebecca dropped the handset and focused on driving. The Jeep slid through a curve, rear end fishtailing before she corrected. Too fast, but not fast enough to slow down. The miles fell away. Forest gave way to clearings, then to the manicured grounds approaching the lodge. Rebecca saw the other vehicle in the parking lot, dark pickup truck, engine running, driver's door open. Davies was already here. She pulled the Jeep to a hard stop, 50 feet from the entrance, grabbed her rifle, chambered around, and moved toward the building. The lodge's main entrance was locked. Through the windows, she saw the lobby empty. Emergency evacuation complete. Rebecca moved along the building's exterior, checking windows. Third one showed what she needed. Ground floor hallway, Davies moving door to door, checking rooms. He hadn't found Claire yet, but he would. Rebecca calculated angles. Breaking in through the window would alert him. Going through the main entrance risked him using Claire as a hostage if he'd already located her. She needed to end this before he found his target. The radio on her belt crackled. Sierra 2, Davies is armed. Repeat, Davies is armed and dangerous. Rebecca moved to the building's rear entrance staff access, usually unlocked during operating hours. She tried the handle. Locked. She looked for another option. Fire escape on the second floor. She could climb, access through a window, come at him from above. No time. Rebecca made the decision. She stepped back from the rear door and kicked hard, just above the lock. The door frame splintered but held. Second kick broke it open. She entered moving, rifle up, scanning for threats. The hallway ahead showed two directions, left toward the lobby, right toward guest rooms. Davies' voice carried from the right. I just want to talk. No one needs to get hurt. Rebecca moved right, clearing corners with practiced precision. At the hallway's end, she saw him, 20 feet ahead, back to her, focused on a door he was trying to open. Claire's room. Rebecca's crosshairs found him. Davies. He spun, bringing a pistol up from his side. The shot was clean. No civilians in the line of fire. No time for negotiation. Rebecca's trigger finger moved through that final 2 pounds of pressure. The rifle bucked once. The suppressor muted the sound to a heavy thump. Davies went down hard, pistol clattering away unfired. Rebecca advanced, rifle trained on him. When she reached his position, she confirmed. Center mass hit. No vitals struck, but combat effectiveness eliminated. He'd survive if medical help arrived quickly. She keyed her radio. Target down. Send medical. Alert Claire Donovan, it's safe to exit her room. The door opened slowly. Claire looked out, saw Rebecca, then Davies on the ground. You again. Sorry about the interruption. Claire stepped fully into the hallway. Who are you? Someone who makes sure people go home safe. Rangers arrived 30 seconds later, Chen leading, Morrison and 2 others behind her. They secured Davies, started first aid, called for an ambulance. Chen looked at Rebecca with a mixture of respect and resignation. We'll need you to make an official statement. No. You'll receive a classified briefing tomorrow that explains what you need to know. My involvement stays off the record. Federal immunity? Something like that. Chen nodded. She'd been in law enforcement long enough to recognize jurisdictions beyond her authority. The woman will need to know something. She deserves that much. Rebecca looked at Claire, who stood watching everything with wide eyes. She already knows enough, Rebecca said. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. That's sufficient. She turned to leave. Claire's voice stopped her. Thank you. For saving my life twice. Rebecca paused. You were in the wrong place at the right time. That happens. Do you do this often? Save random people? Define often. A ghost of a smile crossed Claire's face despite the circumstances. Will I see you again? Right. Classified. Rebecca allowed herself a rare show of warmth. Get home safe, Claire. Stay out of forests in winter. She walked back down the hallway, leaving rangers to manage the scene. Outside, the snow had finally stopped. The Jeep was where she'd left it. Rebecca climbed in, started the engine, and drove toward the extraction point. Her phone showed one message from command. Mission success. Full debrief. 0800 tomorrow. Good work. Rebecca deleted the message and drove into the darkening forest. By tomorrow, Claire would be home. Davies would be in custody. Mercer's operation would be compromised. The cabin would be processed. And Rebecca would be somewhere else, watching someone else through a scope, making decisions most people never knew needed making. The cold settled in as night fell. Rebecca drove through it, already thinking about the next mission, the next target, the next impossible choice. Some people protected others from the front. She did it from a distance, 300 meters, sometimes less. Always enough to make the difference between living and dying. The classified briefing room at the regional FBI office was the kind of place that swallowed sound. Rebecca sat across from Deputy Director Marcus Callahan, who reviewed her after-action report with the careful attention of someone who'd spent 30 years turning field operations into bureaucratic documentation. You broke a dozen protocols, Callahan said finally. His tone carried no judgment, just statement of fact. Civilian life was at risk. The civilian was safe with rangers. You could have let local law enforcement handle Davies. 45 minutes out in a snowstorm, Davies would have reached her in 15. Callahan leaned back in his chair. You commandeered a civilian vehicle without authority. I had mission priority authorization to protect the asset. Claire Donovan wasn't an asset. She was a witness who accidentally compromised an ongoing investigation. She became an asset when Davies decided she was a threat to be eliminated. Callahan smiled slightly. You're very good at this. At what? Justifying decisions you'd already made before considering the consequences. Rebecca said nothing. He was right, and they both knew it. The good news, Callahan continued, is that you were correct. Davies had a contract to silence Donovan before she could provide testimony. We found the communication on his encrypted phone. Someone in Mercer's network ordered the hit within an hour of the cabin incident. Still tracking that. But Davies is cooperating now that he's facing attempted murder charges on federal land. He's giving us names, locations, the full trafficking route. Mercer's operation is effectively dismantled. And the woman with Mercer at the cabin? Identified as Sarah Vance, a logistics coordinator for his operation. She's been taken into custody, also cooperating. Rebecca processed this. The entire network collapsed because a woman went hiking. Chaos theory, Callahan said. Small actions, large consequences. Your after-action report was very thorough on that point. I included what was relevant. You left out the part where you let the first contractor walk away in the forest. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. He'd surrendered. Wasn't an active threat. I made a tactical decision to ensure the civilian reached safety, rather than secure a prisoner I couldn't transport. And if he'd circled back? If he'd reached Donovan before you could intervene? He didn't. Callahan closed the folder. You're being reassigned. Effective immediately. New theater, new mission parameters. Where? Alaska. Similar operation, isolated terrain, hostile conditions, target who thinks geography protects them. When? Wheels up in 6 hours. Your briefing package is waiting at Andrews Air Force Base. Rebecca stood. Sir, about the Jeep owner. Already handled. He's been compensated for his cooperation and signed the necessary documentation. The incident is classified. He understands. And Claire Donovan? Miss Donovan has been thoroughly debriefed by the FBI. She understands that her statement is classified and that she witnessed a federal operation she's not authorized to discuss publicly. She's been cooperative. She deserves better than vague explanations. Callahan's expression softened slightly. She's alive because of you. That's what matters. The rest is just paperwork and politics. Rebecca left the briefing room and took the elevator down to the parking garage. Her gear was already packed, her rifle cleaned and secured, her extraction from Montana complete in every way that mattered. But the mission lingered in her mind during the drive to the airport. 3 different parties converging on one cabin. One woman's random hike changing the trajectory of a multi-state trafficking investigation. A split-second decision to let Davies live in the forest, then shooting him hours later in a lodge hallway. The math of violence was never clean. You tried to minimize harm while maximizing mission success, but the variables were human and humans were unpredictable. Rebecca thought about Claire. About the fear in her eyes when Davies had lunged. About the question she'd asked. Will I see you again? The answer had been no, would always be no. Rebecca's work required anonymity and distance. She couldn't afford connections or recognition. But sometimes, she wondered what it would be like to be the kind of person who saved lives in daylight, who received gratitude and recognition, who didn't vanish into forests after pulling triggers. She dismissed the thought. Everyone had a role. Hers was to be the person no one saw coming. At Andrews, she collected her briefing package and boarded the transport aircraft. Inside, she found a single envelope marked with her operational call sign. Inside the envelope, a handwritten note. To the woman who twice saved my life. I don't know your name or where you're from. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. I was lost in more ways than one that day. My life felt small and purposeless. Watching you make impossible decisions with absolute certainty reminded me that courage comes in different forms. I'm going home tomorrow. Going to face my problems instead of hiking away from them. Going to be someone who doesn't need saving. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like. C. D. Rebecca read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in her personal effects bag. She'd carry it to Alaska, and probably to whatever mission came after that. Not because she needed the gratitude, but because it reminded her why the work mattered. The aircraft's engines powered up. Within minutes, they were airborne, heading north into new weather and new missions. Rebecca closed her eyes and let the vibration of the aircraft settle her mind. Alaska meant mountains and isolation and targets who thought they were untouchable. They'd learn otherwise. 300 meters was a long distance to most people. To Rebecca, it was close enough to change lives. One shot, one decision, one invisible guardian watching through a scope. The world needed people willing to work in daylight. It also needed people willing to work in shadow. Rebecca had made her choice years ago. She'd make it again tomorrow and every day after. Some heroes were celebrated, others were classified. She preferred the latter. 6 months after Montana, Rebecca stood on an Alaskan ridgeline watching a compound through her scope. Different mission, same calculus. People who thought geography protected them from consequence. She'd proven them wrong twice already this deployment. A third target waited for the right weather window. Her satellite phone vibrated. Unusual communications during active surveillance were rare. She checked the screen. Encrypted message from Callahan. Update on Montana operation. Mercer sentenced to 25 years. Davies sentenced to 18 years. Vance received immunity for testimony. Network dismantled completely. Civilian witness relocated to secure location per her request. Rebecca lowered the phone. Processing. Claire had been relocated. That meant the threat assessment had determined she was still at risk from Mercer's associates. A second message arrived. Donovan requested your contact info. Request denied per protocol. She asked me to tell you, I'm not running anymore. Rebecca stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it and returned her attention to the scope. The compound remained quiet. Another day of waiting, maybe 2. Then action would compress into seconds and the mission would conclude. But her mind wandered back to Montana, to Claire standing in a hallway, asking if they'd meet again, to the certainty in Rebecca's voice when she'd said no. She'd meant it. Her work required distance from the people she protected. Attachment created compromise. Compromise created mistakes. Mistakes created casualties. But knowing Claire was somewhere safe, living a life free from fear, facing problems instead of running from them that mattered, that made the cold and the waiting and the impossible choices worthwhile. Rebecca's spotter arrived at her position 3 hours later, a younger operator named Torres, who'd recently passed selection. He settled in beside her, pulling out his own scope. "Target?" he asked quietly. "Northern building, second window. He'll move to it within 30 minutes. Weather's clearing. He'll want to check the perimeter." Torres adjusted his scope. "Long shot? 612 meters. Wind from the northwest at 8 knots. Cold bore, so first round offset. You'll compensate?" "I always do." They waited in silence. Torres was learning what Rebecca had learned years ago, that 90% of this work was patience. The other 10% was making sure the patience paid off. "Can I ask you something?" Torres said eventually. "Depends on the question. How do you decide? When to shoot, when to let someone walk?" Rebecca kept her eye to the scope. "You follow the rules of engagement. You protect the mission priority. You minimize civilian risk. Beyond that, you trust your training. But training doesn't cover everything. No. Sometimes you make a choice and wonder if it was right, but you can't hesitate when the moment comes, or you lose both the mission and your integrity. What if you make the wrong choice?" Rebecca finally looked at him. "Then you live with it. That's the job." Torres nodded slowly. "The instructors said you've never missed a shot that mattered. The ones that miss don't make it into the statistics. Have you missed one that mattered?" Rebecca turned back to her scope. The target had appeared in the window, exactly on schedule. Once. Afghanistan, 2021. Long story, bad weather. Target moved at the wrong moment. Round went 2 inches left of where I needed it. What happened? Secondary shooter took the shot. Target was eliminated. Mission success. So it didn't matter that you missed? It mattered to me. The target lingered at the window, speaking into a phone. Rebecca adjusted her breathing, began the mental checklist. Range confirmed. Wind accounted for. Rifle status optimal. "How do you process it?" Torres asked. "Knowing someone stops existing because you moved your finger 3 pounds? I don't think about it that way. I think about the people who keep existing because I did." "Like Montana?" Rebecca glanced at him sharply. "You read my file. Callahan recommended it. Said your Montana operation was textbook crisis management. Multiple threats, civilian in danger. You adapted in real time and saved her life twice. I did my job. Is that all it was?" The question hung between them. Rebecca focused on the scope, tracking the target's movement. He was leaving the window, heading toward the door. "No," she said finally. "Sometimes it's personal. Sometimes you're protecting someone specific rather than a concept. That day it was personal. I made decisions based on keeping one woman alive. Consequences be damned. And you'd do it again?" Without hesitation. The target exited the building, crossing the compound toward a vehicle, walking into the open space where Rebecca had calculated the perfect shot angle 3 days ago. She settled into the firing position, exhaled halfway, found the point between heartbeats where the body stilled completely. Torres watched through his spotting scope. "Send it." Rebecca's finger moved through the final pressure. The rifle fired. The recoil was familiar, almost comforting. 612 meters away, the target dropped. "Hit," Torres confirmed. "Center mass, he's down." Rebecca cycled the bolt, chambering a follow-up round, but the target wasn't moving. One shot, one result, the way it should be. She safed the rifle and began breaking down her position. The mission was complete. Extraction would happen within the hour. Tomorrow she'd be somewhere warmer, preparing for a different operation. "That ease you have," Torres said, helping pack gear. "When you take the shot, how long did it take to develop?" It wasn't about time. It was about accepting what I'd signed up for, which is being the person who makes sure good people don't die because bad people exist. They finished packing in silence and began the descent from the ridgeline. Alaska stretched endlessly below them, mountains and valleys and forests that hid 1,000 secrets. Somewhere far to the south, in whatever city Claire had been relocated to, she was living the life Rebecca's bullet had preserved. Maybe she thought about that day sometimes, Maybe she'd moved on completely. Either way, she was alive. That was enough. Rebecca had learned long ago that heroes came in different forms. Some stood in light and received medals. Others crouched in shadows and received classified commendations that no one would ever read. The work was what mattered. The result. The lives saved by invisible guardians who asked nothing in return except the opportunity to do it again. Rebecca reached the valley floor and headed toward the extraction point. Torres followed, quieter now, probably processing what he'd witnessed. "One more question," he said eventually. Rebecca sighed. "Make it count. The woman in Montana, Donovan, you think she knows how lucky she was? She knows she lived. That's enough. Is it? For you, I mean?" Rebecca stopped walking and looked back at the mountain they'd descended. The compound was invisible from this distance, just another anonymous structure in vast wilderness. The target inside was cooling to ambient temperature. His operation ended, his threat neutralized. Claire would never know about this mission or any other. Would never know that Rebecca's work continued in places most people couldn't imagine. But she'd live her life free from shadows, and that was worth every cold morning and every impossible shot. "Yeah," Rebecca said. "It's enough." They continued toward extraction. The helicopter was already inbound, rotors thumping in the thin air. Within hours, Rebecca would be debriefed, reassigned, and pointed toward the next mission. Some people protected from up close. Rebecca did it from a distance. 300 meters, sometimes more. Always enough to make the difference. The classified memorial wall at Fort Bragg had no names. Just dates and locations. Coordinates of operations where American lives had been saved by people who'd never be publicly acknowledged. Rebecca stood in front of it during a rare visit to the States. Somewhere on this wall was the Afghan operation where she'd proven herself. The Syrian mission that earned her first classified commendation. The maritime interdiction off Somalia that prevented a weapon shipment from reaching terrorists. And now, Montana would be added. A small notation, date and GPS coordinates, nothing more. Another invisible victory in a long series of actions the public would never learn about. "You don't visit often." Rebecca turned to find Callahan approaching. He looked older than their last meeting. This job aged people in ways that didn't show on standard physicals. "Didn't see the point," Rebecca said. "The wall isn't for us. No. It's for the people who need to know we existed." Callahan stood beside her, studying the engraved dates. 23 years I've been clearing people for this kind of work. You're the best I've seen. Flattery doesn't suit you, sir." "Not flattery. Assessment." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "New assignment. Different profile." Rebecca took it. "Where?" "Domestic. Pacific Northwest. Situation involving a federal witness program compromise. Someone's hunting protected assets. We need someone who can turn the tables." "Timeline?" "You have a week to prepare. After that, you'll be embedded in Seattle for the duration. Could be months." Rebecca opened the envelope and scanned the briefing summary. 3 witnesses dead in 6 months, all supposedly under protection. Pattern suggested an inside source providing locations. "This isn't a single target operation," she said. "No. This is systematic elimination of threats to organized crime interests. You'll need to identify the leak, protect the remaining witnesses, and neutralize whoever's running the operation. That's outside my skill set. I'm a sniper, not an investigator. You're someone who makes impossible decisions in impossible circumstances. That's exactly what this needs." Callahan paused. "Also, one of the witnesses is a woman who reminds me of your Montana civilian. Young, caught in something she didn't understand, testifying because it's the right thing to do." Rebecca closed the envelope. "You're appealing to sentiment. I'm appealing to the fact that you're very good at keeping people like her alive." They stood in silence for a moment. The memorial wall reflected in the overhead lighting cold, clean, absent of the context that gave the dates meaning. "The woman from Montana," Rebecca said. "Donovan. How is she?" Callahan's expression shifted slightly. "That's classified. You told me she was relocated." "She was. She's safe, thriving, according to our last check-in." "Define thriving." "New job, new city, new identity. She's built a life that doesn't require looking over her shoulder." Callahan met Rebecca's gaze. You did that. Your decisions that day gave her a second chance. I did my job. You exceeded your mission parameters to protect a civilian who wasn't even your assigned target. That's not just doing a job. That's caring about the outcome. Rebecca wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. He was right. She'd made choices in Montana that prioritized one woman's life above protocol, above procedure, above the clean execution of her original mission. And she'd do it again. The Seattle assignment, she said, changing the subject. What's the civilian's name? Angela Reeves, 28 years old, testified against a trafficking network operating in 3 states. She's currently in protective custody, 4th location in 6 months. Each previous location was compromised within weeks. Someone in the Marshal Service is selling information. That's the assessment. Your job is to find them before they can provide Reeves's current location. And if they already have, then you do what you do best. Stand between the threat and the asset. Make sure she lives long enough for us to dismantle the network completely. Rebecca tucked the envelope into her jacket. I'll need full access to the witness files, communication logs, every detail of the previous breaches. Already arranged. You'll have complete autonomy. Report directly to me. No oversight from marshals or local law enforcement. They'll resist that. They'll be told it's coming from the top. This operation has presidential authorization. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. For a witness protection case? For dismantling a criminal network that's corrupted federal law enforcement. Angela Reeves is leverage. Her testimony connects 30 people to trafficking operations spanning 5 years. If she disappears, the case collapses. Then why not just transfer her out of the country? Witness protection in Ireland or Australia. Geography solves the problem. Callahan shook his head. Her testimony requires her physical presence in court. Trial starts in 4 months. Until then, she stays in the States, and someone needs to keep her breathing. Rebecca understood. This wasn't just about protecting one witness. It was about preserving the integrity of an entire investigation. If the bad guys won, if they could eliminate witnesses despite federal protection, then the system collapsed. I'll take it, she said. I knew you would. Callahan turned to leave, then paused. Rebecca? The Montana civilian? Donovan. She wrote you one more letter. It's in the briefing package. She knows the rules. No contact with operational personnel. It's not addressed to you by name. It's addressed to the woman who helped me. I cleared it for inclusion because it contains no operational details, just gratitude. Rebecca said nothing. Callahan continued, You're allowed to care about the people you protect. It doesn't make you weaker. Sometimes, it makes you more effective. He walked away, leaving Rebecca alone with the memorial wall and the envelope containing her next mission. She waited until she was in her car before opening the briefing package again. The letter was at the back, single page, handwritten. To the woman who helped me. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I write it anyway, because some debts need acknowledging even if they can never be repaid. 6 months ago, I was lost in more ways than geographical. My marriage was ending. My career felt meaningless. I'd taken that hike, hoping the cold and the distance would clarify things. Instead, I nearly died twice. You prevented both outcomes. I'm writing this from my new life. New city, new job, new purpose. The details aren't important, and I probably shouldn't share them anyway. What matters is that I'm no longer running from problems. I'm facing them. You showed me what strength looks like. Real strength, not the loud kind that demands recognition, but the quiet kind that does what needs doing and walks away. I don't know your name. I don't know if you're out there right now, protecting someone else. I hope you are. The world needs people like you. But I also hope you know that you're not just a weapon pointed at bad people. You're a reason good people get to keep living. You're proof that invisible guardians exist. Thank you for my second chance. I'm trying to earn it. With respect and gratitude, Claire Donovan. Rebecca read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the same compartment where she kept the first letter. 2 pieces of paper, 2 reminders of why the work mattered. She started the car and pulled out of Fort Bragg's parking lot. Seattle was 3,000 miles west. The flight was tomorrow morning. She had tonight to prepare. But first, She drove to the overlook outside Fayetteville, where snipers came to practice long-range shooting. The facility was empty this late. The range is closed. She parked and walked to the 1,000-meter line, where targets sat invisible in the darkness. Rebecca stood there, imagining the calculations. Wind, distance, temperature. The mathematics of delivering precision across vast space. 300 meters, 600, 1,000. The distance didn't change the fundamental truth. Someone was always in the crosshairs, and someone else was making the decision. She'd made that decision dozens of times, would make it dozens more. Each time, she'd carry the weight of choosing who lived and who stopped. That weight never got lighter. You just got stronger. Rebecca returned to her car and drove toward the airport hotel. Tomorrow, she'd be in Seattle, beginning a new mission with new variables. Angela Reeves would never know she had a guardian. The corrupt marshal would never see the trap being set. And somewhere in whatever city Claire Donovan now called home, a woman was living a life she'd been given back by someone she'd never see again. The snow had covered all tracks that day in Montana. By the time forensics arrived, the forest had erased the evidence of Rebecca's presence. It was as if she'd never been there. That was how she preferred it. Invisible, unnamed, unknown except as a brief moment of intervention between chaos and safety. Some heroes wore uniforms and received medals. Others wore ghillie suits and received classified memos. Rebecca had chosen her path years ago. She'd walk it until her body or her mind failed, whichever came first. After that, her name would join the coordinates on the memorial wall. Another date, another location, no explanation beyond the implicit one. Someone lived because of this. That was legacy enough. The snow fell in Montana that night. It fell on the cabin where everything had changed. It fell on the forest where impossible decisions had been made. It fell on tracks already long erased, covering them deeper, making the past invisible. Rebecca drove through the darkness toward her next mission, carrying letters from a woman who understood what most never would. Sometimes help comes from 300 meters away. Sometimes a guardian angel wears camouflage and operates outside official channels. Sometimes the difference between life and death is measured in trigger pressure,